Happy Tuesday, party people! Yes, it is in fact April 14th. We are weeks away from finals, as crazy as that sounds. Hope everyone is still hanging in there. Everyone may or may not be watching my lovely PowerPoints lectures, but for those of you who are, welcome back. I hope they are helping. I hope it is helping permeate some of these topics, explaining it more, causing you to feel more comfortable with the information, etc., etc. They take, for every hour lecture that I record, it takes about 2.5 to actually, all together to get it recorded, posted, and updated, processed, blah, blah, blah. So I appreciate people watching, so thank you again for coming back. Today we are starting our civil rights section. We're going to hit today our lecture on civil rights of the 1950s, which is when the civil rights movement shockingly started, right? Technically, this is the part that, if you check your chapter 28 quiz, which all of you have at this point, I do believe, I left, you were not responsible for covering civil rights of the 1950s on the quiz, right? Because I combine all of the civil rights movement together into one lecture, and then you're tested over civil rights as a whole. It's easier to do that way. So, anywho, with that said, so we're going to pick up with the technically still the 1950s, but again, the birth of the civil rights movement, and hit it with in 1954 when we had the civil rights movement begin because of a court case called Brown versus the Board of Education. So, this whole thing actually is going to end up starting because of a 7-year-old little girl by the name of Linda Brown. My hair right here is driving me crazy. I may have to go put that up. Anyway. It looks so cute in the mirror, and then I get in here on my laptop, and it looks like just pure craze. Anyway, alright, so, girl moment. Alright, so, 1954. Jim Crow laws are still in full effect. We had Plessy versus Ferguson in the 1890s that deemed segregation constitutional. The Jim Crow laws were created. Everyone has been living... Lord, my hair's gonna drive me crazy. Everyone's been living with them up until this point. Blacks and whites are my hair's gonna drive me crazy. It looks so cute except for right here. Anyway, again, girl moment. Sorry. Anyway, blacks and whites are growing up in completely different worlds. You have, again, segregation in full effect. Everything from black and white, restrooms, drinking fountains, everything. Swimming halls, dance halls, schools. Schools are a big one. Theaters, baseball stadiums, everything you can possibly think of is segregated, right? Not to mention there's still an insane amount of racism occurring in this country. I mean, blacks and whites are just growing up in completely different worlds right next door to each other. And there's been no question. There's been no challenge to it. There's just been kind of this beaten down acceptance up until this point, which is unacceptable, but was reality. Until 1954. You had, again, schools were one of the big primary things that were segregated in this day and age. And, obviously blacks cannot go to white schools. So, per se, this all starts because, long story short, the Brown family. It's going to grow to be a much bigger beast than just this one family, but it's this one family who's going to start it off. But there is the Brown families. The Browns have a 7-year-old little girl by the name of Linda Brown, who, due to the Jim Crow laws and segregation and the type of jobs that her parents can get, they live in a kind of rundown, drabby part of town. They can't afford, to live in a more upper-scale neighborhood. It's a dangerous area. But it's all they can afford due to the jobs they can get because of the color of their skin. And so, even though there is a school about 3 blocks from their house that Linda Brown's family could walk her, hold her hand and walk her to and from safely every day, they can't. They can't because it's a white school and Linda Brown is black. And again, blacks can't go to white school. So every morning, instead of being able to walk their daughter to school, the Browns walk Linda to the bus station at where 7 years old, because they have to go to work. So at 7 years old, first grader, she's got to board the city bus on her own, ride to the city bus across town, get off the bus, safely make it to the African American school. After school's over, get herself safely back to the bus, ride the city bus back across town to the bus station, and get home. It's dangerous. What person in this day and age would want their 7-year-old to board a city bus and then be like, "Hi, bye, honey. See you when you get home from school," and expect them to get across town to get to school safely on their own? They hate it. I mean, it just absolutely is a parent's worst nightmare, especially when there's a school that could safely ensure walking her to themselves, making sure she got there okay every day. She's not allowed to go because she's black. And finally, her parents have had enough. Enough is enough. The fact that they have to put their child through this and put their child's life literally, possibly in danger. I mean, segregation, racism, a black little girl on her own. I mean, it's the reality of this country. So they decided that enough's enough, and they're going to fight the system. They're going to fight the system and deem that children should be able to go to schools safely. And they should, if there's a white school, then children should be able to go to any school, close to them, and that is safe. And this whole concept of school segregation based on color of skin is unjustifiable. So they start the fight. They start the process. More and more families will bind onto this argument, onto this fight. It used to be about 6 or 7 families who will be fighting this, against school segregation together. And long story short, this will go. I mean, this whole concept, this whole fight will continue to gain national news. It'll continue to gain press. It'll continue to gain this national spotlight and all this attention. And eventually it'll reach the ears of a highly intelligent, highly respected African-American lawyer by the name of Thurgood Marshall, who will take on their case, basically pro bono, for free, and be their voice to fight this fight for them, in the judicial system. And it goes all the way to being a Supreme Court case. Brown versus the Board of Education. And throughout this process, Thurgood Marshall, it is his team, but it is his case. His name is tied to it. But he's got all of these, lawyers that work under him. He's got a whole team of people. Kenneth Clark being one of them, by the way. And Kenneth Clark oversees a lot of these tests, a lot of tests that are done. Because again, to prove their point, they've got to prove that segregation is unjustifiable. They've got to prove their argument that segregation is damaging to children. So there's all these sorts of tests, all these tests that are done with, throughout this court case. So many, many more than just this one. But the most famous one easily has become known as the doll test. And this is where, Kenneth Clark, I have his own. I can only see half of the PowerPoint slides on my phone, by the way. It's so irritating. Yeah, I can only see half of it, so I can't see the whole quote. But long story short, you're going to remember, the majority, blah, 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 blah. Where's this quote? Basically, it says, to show damage in a violation of equal protection under the 14th Amendment, you had to show that being segregated actually damaged children. So again, the most famous test we may have all heard of before was a doll test. You took 12 white children, 12 black children, individually, one by one, taken into this playroom, this toy room, with a child psychologist in there as well to ensure this was all done properly. And all these children were allowed to, all sorts of, toys galore. So all these children were allowed to play, get comfortable, get comfortable with, get to play for a little bit until finally, there would be someone, there would be a woman who came in the room, again, comfortable. And each of those 24 children, 12 black, 12 white, were asked and were shown a set of dolls. A black doll, a white doll, etc., etc. And they were asked to pick up the doll. Eventually, they were asked to pick up the doll that was better. Of these two dolls, this black doll and this white doll, which is the better doll? Which doll do you like more? And 24 out of 24 children picked up the white doll. All 12 African-American children picked up the white doll. That was a better doll. Okay, we'll put that one down. And then they're told, now pick up the doll that is most like you. Which one represents you? And this is when the African-American children had to pick up the black doll because it looks like them, right? And all of them all of them got upset. Some started to cry. Others were visibly emotionally upset. And when asked what was wrong, why were they crying? Because the black doll is bad. The black doll is filthy. The black doll is disgusting. The black doll is awful. The black doll is garbage. It's trash. Every word they could possibly think of And of course, are they talking about the doll? No. It's everything that they have been told. They have been yelled at. That they have been, had spit at them. That they have been told to them for their lives. They're talking about themselves. It's how they come to see themselves. And these are children. These are innocent children who already are having this perceived image of themselves shoved down their throats by the white society. Because we were so racistly segregated in this day and age. I mean, it was just awful. Awful, awful. It's horrible. And every test that was like it came back with similar results. And all this evidence, all this proof, all these arguments, the court case, it was not long. It was not quick. It went on for a good long time. But finally, and I can't see my whole quote here. It's irritating me. It's on my phone. It's only showing me half of my slide. I don't know why. Anyway, you will see the entire quote. I'll have to paraphrase a little bit. I can't read it word for word because I can only see the first line of it. But the Supreme Court ruling came back, and they said to separate black children from others of similar age and qualifications solely because of their race generates a feeling of inferiority as to their status in the community that will change their hearts and minds in a way unlikely to ever be undone. And showed that, long story short, what is happening to them because of the segregated country, the way they're being treated solely because of their race, the color of their skin, is wrong. And for the first time since literally it's been 6 years. 1894, you had 1894, you had Plessy versus Ferguson. 1954, 60 years, basically, to the year. Brown versus the board will flip-flop that. Brown versus the board will go on to deem segregation, school segregation, illegal. And, demand that segregation, in school, right now in schools, it's not hitting the entire country, you get the point. It's not hitting everything. But school segregation is illegal. Segregation in schools is unconstitutional, and schools should start to integrate. It was a huge win, guys. It was a massive, massive win that is going to be the true beginning of the civil rights movement. It's going to start all of this off. It's going to kick all of this off. And it's be this huge platform and this stepping stone for everything else in the civil rights movement to come. You got the Supreme Court, obviously, behind them to a certain degree at this point, right? You've got, they finally, that door is cracked open. It's not, the door of integration and the light at the end of the tunnel. They've been beating and battering on this door for how many decades? It's finally cracked open, and the other side is possible. It's seen. So this will eliminate the entire thought process. It will be the backbone of this movement, and it'll give others confidence to fight. Fights in other areas of this, as we're fixing to talk about next. But for the first time, they feel they have a voice, they have a power, and change is possible. So, 1954, Brown versus Board kicks this whole thing off. But the first time we really see a fight take place, we see the civil rights movement, a true, real struggle battle begin, is a year later, in 1955, in Montgomery, Alabama, with the Montgomery bus boycott. We all know this infamous story, right? Montgomery bus boycott, the story of Rosa Parks, who we all know, bless her heart, we all know she was arrested for refusing to give up her seat on a bus, etc., etc. She's famous for it, as well she should be. This entire story is because of her. This entire story revolves, would never have been without her. She is such a huge, massive part of the story. But guys, she's literally the first day of the story. This is such a bigger beast than people realize. She kicked it off, but she was just, the blip on the radar of this entire story because she was a part of it for a day. She kicked the whole thing off. She deserves all the credit in the world, don't get me wrong. But this will go on 364 days after her. So this is a big deal. This is a lot bigger deal and a lot bigger story than people realize. But Rosa Parks, take the story out of it. She's a very impressive individual. college educated, which for African Americans in that day and age was crazy, was very, very, very rare. But she had received not only was she college educated, she had received a degree in laboratory sciences from Alabama State College. It was an African American college. But long story short, she was a scientist. She received a degree in laboratory sciences. She was a scientist, college graduate scientist. And she can't find a job in her field because of the color of her skin. Smart, 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 smart woman. Educated woman. Ambitious woman. But in December of 1955, she boards that bus as a seamstress. She can only get work as a seamstress in this country, which is ridiculously shocking. And there's not one thing wrong, by the way. There's not one thing wrong with being a seamstress whatsoever. Oh my dear God. Of course there isn't. But when you are a scientist, an educated, smart scientist, and the highest paying job, which is not high paying at all, by the way, the highest paying job you can get is as a seamstress solely because of the color of your skin. There's a lot wrong with that, right? There's a lot wrong with that. So she's a seamstress. She, doesn't make a lot of money. She's forced to ride the city bus to and from work. This specific day, December 1st, 1955, she boards the city bus after a long day at work. And here's what's important to note. So, and across the country, by the way, blacks and whites would ride the same bus. But the first row in African American, they wouldn't wait for the same bus in the same waiting room, by the way. Oh my dear God, no. You had black waiting rooms and white waiting rooms. It's so ridiculous. It's so embarrassing how the way our country used to be. But, so, whites would board the bus first. But, the first 4 rows, I don't know where 3 came from. Yeah, the first 3 rows. I'm not thinking my part right now. The first 3 rows on a city bus were reserved for whites. So, meaning the first row for an African American was the 4th row. There we go. See, that's where my head was going. So, rows 1, 2, 3 reserved for whites. Rows 4 through 12 or 4 through 16. However, I don't know for sure, but in my mind, I can see there's at least probably 12 rows on a city bus, right? So let's say there are 12, and there might be more in this day, but you get the point. So if a 4th of the bus is reserved for whites, it tells you how few whites, long story short, are riding the bus, right? How few whites if 3 rows are reserved for them and 9 are reserved for African Americans? And which is a standard, which tells you usually those first 3 rows aren't always full. But this day they were. This day apparently it was a heavy day. Rosa Parks gets on. She takes a seat on the 4th row next to another gentleman. But apparently in the end she's going home. But apparently it was a long day. She had a long day. She was already at her breaking point this day. And it was a heavy day for the busing company, right? Lots of people running the bus that day. So within a matter of time, the first 3 rows, whites continue to get on, probably more than normal. The first 3 rows were full. They stopped at this bus depot in Montgomery, which is where they were stopping everywhere. But you get the point. They stop at another stop. A white man gets on the bus. Well, the first 3 rows are basically full. There's nowhere for him to sit. There is room on the 4th row next to Rosa Parks and this other gentleman. You can fit more than 1 person on a bus row. But God forbid he sit next to them. Holy freaking crap. Not happening. If the first 3 rows are full, a white person gets on the bus, even if there's room, even if there's still a spot obviously open next to black people on the 4th row. Nope, can't. We're not sitting next to each other. We're too good for that. Just ask us. Again, it's so ridiculous. Everyone on that 4th row needs to get up and give the entire, if that means you stand, but you give that entire row to the white person, which is what Rosa Parks and this gentleman are told to do. They are told to, he gets on, there's a spot, but no, we're not sitting next to each other. That's not happening. So they're told to get up, to move, to give the row to this white gentleman. The man does. He's, bless his heart, probably just not a fight he feels like fighting, right? Rosa Parks, however, says, screw that, I'm not doing that. There's plenty of room for him to sit next to me. My feet hurt, I'm not moving. Now, there is a little bit of risk here for her. In that moment, I'm sure she wasn't thinking of the Brown versus the Board and having a platform, having a little bit of a backbone, having a little bit of a backing her here, per se. At that point, she just says, my feet are tired, I'm not freaking moving. But it's like the first time your kids say no to you. Like, I'm sorry, what'd you just say to me? Did you really just tell me no? Who is this African American woman who thinks she can talk that way to a white man? Hell to the freaking no. And this will obviously, which again, mentality is ridiculous, but that's the way we used to be. And the fact she says, no, I'm not moving, again, she is passive. She is calm. She's not causing a scene. She's very quiet. She's very respectful. Everyone else is making a scene. Other people, the driver gets up and starts yelling and screaming at her to move. She sits there and says, I'm not moving. He can sit down next to me. I'm not moving. Other white gentlemen on the bus were like, I cannot believe this black woman is talking back to white men. They get up, they get involved. There's a lot of screaming, there's hollering. People are just outraged at her behavior. Believe it or not, it's ridiculous. Long story short, there was a policeman out on the streets who heard the yelling and screaming on the bus, boarded the bus to see what in the world was going on, and as we all know, long story short, she is arrested. She is arrested for disorderly conduct. Break it down, she's arrested for not being willing to give up her seat so one man can have the entire row. She is found in the wrong, she is hauled off, she is arrested. WTF. That's what we know. That is what we know, the Montgomery bus boycott. We know it starts a boycott, it starts this fight. A lot of people don't know what happens next. What happens after this boycott is over? Excuse me. Whatever happens after she's arrested. People assume they don't know about the rest of the fight. Because again, this was just what kicked it off, guys. This was just the first day. That night, as news is spreading through Montgomery about Rosa Parks' arrest. It spreads through Montgomery. It spreads, throughout Alabama. People across the state start to hear about what had happened in Montgomery. And one of Rosa Parks' professors at Alabama State College, where she graduated from, one of her professors was named Joanne Robinson. And when Joanne Robinson hears about what had happened to Rosa Parks, it would say, oh, hell to the freaking no, nope. And she's just, jaw hits the floor, she's aghast, she is just livid. And she says, you know what, times are changing. Look what happened just last year. Enough is enough. This is wrong. We need to fight against this, right? We need to make a stand. We have a voice now, we need to use it. So she starts to plan a boycott. The day Rosa Parks was going before a judge, the day of her court case, the day this was going to court, the goal was to create this huge show of support for Rosa Parks. So the day of this goes to trial, or the day of her court case begins, she goes before a judge. Joanne Robinson starts spreading the word that specific day throughout Montgomery, but she travels to Montgomery to spread this message, that all African Americans who can find a way, get a ride with a friend, walk. All African Americans who can, stay off the buses that day. The day she goes before a judge, let's all stay off the city buses. Let's make a statement. Let's make an impact that way. That will catch attention. So, because we have a few weeks here, if you know anything about the judicial system, which we all do to some capacity, right? Yeah, you could be sitting in a jail cell before you go before a judge for days to weeks, right? Our system is slow. So she's got, long story short, time to plan this. So as she starts to, the more vocalize this, the more plan this, and spread the word of this boycott, it reaches the ears of a Baptist minister from Alabama, or who is preaching in Alabama by the name of Dr. Martin Luther King. This is where, in Montgomery, by the way, in Montgomery, not Montgomery, oh good grief, I just said Montgomery, I didn't mean Montgomery. It'll come to me here in a minute. He's in Alabama, long story short. It'll come to me here in a second. Anyway, he's a Baptist minister. He hears about this boycott being planned. He hears about this protest being planned. And he's going to fly to Montgomery from the city that he was in. It's going to come to me here in a minute. I'm having a brain fart. Anyway, he's going to come, and this is where Dr. King, long story short, joins the Civil Rights Movement. He will join the fight, which this is really the true first fight of the Civil Rights Movement. Brown versus the Board birthed the Civil Rights Movement. This is the first battle of it. This is where Dr. King, again, his name will become infamous. This is where he will get his start. Because he will join this boycott. He will, with Joanne Robinson, he will start to plan this boycott. And with the goal of spreading the news, spreading the word, getting people across the city to join. I'm having a brain fart right now. I need more coffee. I just need more coffee. It's that time of day. Anyway, as they get closer to her court date, you know, the night before, Dr. King looks at Joanne Robinson and he says, you know what, if we get 60%, Birmingham, I believe it was Birmingham, sorry, anyway, that he was preaching at, anyway, if we get 60% success, if 60% of blacks stay off the buses tomorrow, we're going to deem this thing a success, right? If we can get 60%, you know, success rate, this thing is going to be huge. So they're hoping for 60. The next day, if we were in class, I would ask you this in person. The next day, how many African Americans stay off the city buses? I need another hand. 100. There is not one African American who rides a bus that day. They had 100% success rate, which showed King and Robinson and others. The Montgomery Improvement Association, which was an African American association that had been put together. So you have a whole big melting pot, a lot of political leaders, big names in there. They say, we have a fight here. We again have a platform. We have a foothold. If we have this type of support and this type of backing, how far can we take this thing? We were just planning on having this last a day. This was just supposed to last one day, the day we were going, of Rosa Court's court case beginning, the day she was going into court. But considering the backing that we've got, the support we've got, let's see how far we can take this. So one day turns into 2. 2 days turns into a week. A week turns into 2. 2 turns into a month. And with the goal of all African Americans staying off the busing system in Montgomery. Because again, think about it. And I'm just throwing out that I don't know, honestly, how many. I'm sure it probably differs too. But let's say on average there's 12. Maybe 12 to 16, depending on the side of the bus. But let's say 12. An average of 12 rows per bus. If you have 9 of those reserved for African Americans, it tells you how many African Americans ride the bus every day. And think about how many stops that bus makes in a day. And if not one African American gets on any bus at any stop throughout the entire day, throughout the entire city, that is a huge financial slap to the busing system, to the transportation system in Montgomery. And how do they do it? Some may walk, some may ride a bike. Most take advantage of this private taxi system that was created. And here's the deal, guys. If you are protesting, if you are boycotting, if you are involved in any type of, by the way, non-violent fight, from the day Dr. King gets his start, from day one all the way until he is, spoiler alert, assassinated in 1968, the entire civil rights movement revolves around one very, very specific word: nonviolent. We will not fight in any violent capacity whatsoever. This will be a peaceful movement for us. So, but it was a huge sacrifice, but it was so important to maintain this nonviolent direct action. Direct action is also part of the key. But again, so everyone would take advantage of this private taxi system. And if you are in a struggle, if you are in a fight, a non-violent fight, by the way, there's sacrifice. You have to sacrifice. There's a lot of give and take. and you've got to cut corners, and you've got to sacrifice where need be. So you may have to wake up, again, this private taxi system. Those who own cars, I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Those who own cars, if you have 3 spots in the back and a seat in the front, that's 4. You would wake up maybe an hour and a half early, and you would pick up 4 people. And you would take them to where, those 4 people would wait outside their homes, and they would pay you gas money and a little extra for your time. So best fare plus a little bit more. And you would take them to work or to school or wherever they needed to go. For whatever reason, people would take a bus, which is usually work, majority work, or maybe school. You would use a private taxi system. You would pay an African American with a car. He would come pick you up, come basically Uber in today's world, or Lyft, that type of scenario. And again, that car is picking up 3 other people before you, so you may have to rearrange your time frame a little bit, so your schedule a little bit, tell your work due to the situation you might be a little bit late, but again, people will be okay with that. People fought through, people, found resolutions, people sacrificed, people endured a little bit more hardships, but you know what? It worked. This thing worked. Everyone got to where they needed to go. There was a little bit of sacrifice here and there. A little bit of, what is the word I'm looking for? A little bit of, it'll come to me again here in a minute, just like Birmingham. But it worked, and long story short, day after day, the buses continued to roll by empty with nobody on them. African Americans in Montgomery were making a sacrifice. That's the word I was looking for. It took some no, that's not the word. I need more coffee today. Anyway, but it did take sacrifice. It'll come to me in a minute. Anyway, day after day again turns into weeks, which turns into months. And eventually, it's not just the busing company that is feeling the pinch of this financial strain. It is other businesses throughout Montgomery. People quit. If you're using the private taxi system, you don't want to take advantage of, that person with a car, because they have their own family. They have their own, their own children. They have their own places to go. Compromise. That is the word I was looking for. Everybody would compromise. Your work may let you come in 30 minutes late. You may have to wake up an hour and a half early. Compromise was the word I couldn't think of. See, I told you it would come to me. Okay. Anyway, that makes me feel better. That was going to drive me crazy. Anyway, it's one of those days. But long story short, so people, you want to take advantage of somebody with a car. So you wouldn't ask someone to take you somewhere you didn't need to go. So per se on the weekend, people might have been taking the bus into downtown to go see a movie. People may have been taking a bus into downtown to go eat, go shop. But now they're not. Because again, you don't want to take advantage of those people with the cars, right? So if you don't need to go, people weren't going. And so there was less business in restaurants. There were less business in stores. There was less business in different industries. And finally, no, let's try to do everything to scare the people of Montgomery into giving this up, right? They came to King and they asked King, what will it take? What will it take to, for you to, What does he have? Oh, this is real time, people. Real time. Give me just a second. I'm so sorry. So sorry. So sorry. a dog was chewing on something he wasn't supposed to be chewing on. Anyway, where was I? So Watts came to King and said, look, what is it going to take to end this? Originally, a few weeks into this thing. And King says, we will come back if you agree to full bus integration. As in, we can sit wherever we want to sit. There's no black and white waiting rooms. And if we want to sit on the first row next to a white man, then we get to. And they said, out of the question. Absolutely out of the question. Never going to happen. Not happening. It's a pipe dream. It's not going to happen. And he says, fine. Well, you know what we're doing is working for us. No biggie. We'll just keep doing what we're doing. So, Watts tried to, when King says, fine, we'll just continue on. Watts try to do things like they arrest Dr. King, they throw him in jail, hoping that without their shepherd, the flock would fall apart. But again, King hasn't broken any crimes. This is a fear tactic, and King gets word from inside, jail. He says, hey, they can't hold me. I'll be back. Like, don't let this derail you. Maintain the course. I'll see you in 48 hours, right? Something of that measure. But don't let this derail you. Don't let this scare you. I'll be back. They break, Watts would tear apart people's cars. You come out and your windshield was smashed, your tires were slashed. And scare tactics, that type of thing. But again, people would pick up the slack. People would sacrifice. If someone's car would have been beaten to a bloody pulp and was undrivable, those with drivable cars would meet in the middle and pick up the slack, right, until that car could be fixed. The Baptist churches were bombed because Dr. King was a Baptist minister, things of the measure. But again, nothing derailed them. They knew they were winning. They weren't quite sure what they would get when they came out on top, but they knew they were winning the fight. So, months go on, month goes into 2 turns into 3, this turns into 6. And finally, about a year in, the city, with all these other businesses starting to feel the financial pinch, the city comes back to Dr. King and says, oh my God, fine, you win. We will unsegregate, we will integrate busings. You won. Are you happy? Right? We will integrate buses. Y'all can sit wherever you want. We'll even sit next to each other. Holy crap. Congratulations, you win. King sits back and goes, No, actually. You come to us 9 months ago, that is all we wanted. That is what we wanted, and that was all we wanted. Not now. Now, because again, he knows he's got the power here, right? So he says, we would have taken just bus integration back in that day. Now we won't come back for any less than full city integration. All businesses, all stores, all bathrooms, all drinking fountains, all restaurants, all busing stations, everything integrates, or we don't come back at all. In Montgomery, just this one city and this one state. But you integrate the city, we come back. Well, this is asking way too much, right? Just ask those in power in Montgomery. This is asking way too much. So, oh my dear God, they can't even wrap their heads around it. It's their worst nightmare. So, they're going to take this to the federal courts, and they're going to let the federal courts decide. Because again, don't forget, Brown versus the board just touched school integration. But, again, Brown versus the board opens that door to this fight. Opens the door to the conversation. Opens the door to this new mental way of thinking. Opens the door to this fight. And they take this to the federal courts. And the federal courts come back in favor of a ratio of 2-1 in favor of Dr. King and the boycotters. They come back with a vote of a ratio of 2-1, several hundred people, but 2-1 in favor of integration. The whites had lost. King, Robinson, Parks, African Americans, they had won. So this boycott was supposed to last for a year. It began December 1st, 1955. December 21st, 1956. The city will start to integrate, and blacks will return for the first time in a year and a few weeks to the city buses. Can I see my quote? I hope I can see my quote. here we go. So, yeah, December 21st, 1956. Long story short, the boycott lasted for a year. Here, I can't see my quote. Yay. Although the gains in the Montgomery bus boycott were small compared with gains blacks would later win, the boycott was an important start to the movement. The lasting legacy of the boycott was that it helped to launch a 10-year struggle for freedom and justice. The civil rights movement that will inspire others to do the same at home and abroad. Big win. Big W on top. Right, so we have Brown versus Board, which can be considered a win. We have the Montgomery bus boycott, which, hello, huge win. Non-violent win again, by the way. But there's one more issue with the 1950s, which is the Little Rock Nine. Because again, Brown versus the Board revolved around school integration. So 1954, the Supreme Court rules for school integration. It's not until 1957 you see the first schools start to integrate. I feel like I made this way too tall. Here we go. So you start to see, integration start to be a process. Now I made it too short. I don't know. There, that's better. Anywho, you start to see for the first time, Central High School in Little Rock, Arkansas is going to be the first school, 3 years later, first school to attempt school segregation. It was such a emotionally hot, tense subject. It had taken 3 years for this even to have been tried. I mean, that was how detrimentally dedicated to segregation the South was. But 1957, Little Rock, Arkansas is going to slowly integrate. And they're going to do this slowly. There's only 9, Little Rock 9. Which Central High School, by the way, again, Little Rock, Arkansas. And the top 9 African American students were selected to do this, were selected to be a part of this. It was supposed to be a reward. I mean, the top 9 students. It was supposed to be a reward. It was supposed to be a gift. It was supposed to be an honor. Which I'm sure at the beginning it probably felt like it was. It's just this, for being the top 9 students. So, I mean, the first African Americans to openly go to an all-white, previously high school. And I have the names in my PowerPoint. Several of the names will obviously stick out as we roll on through the story, both in the PowerPoint and in this lecture. But, again, it is listed for you in the PowerPoint. The 9 students to first go to a white high school: Carlotta Walls, Jefferson Thomas, Gloria Ray, Melba Patillo, Minnie Jean Brown, Terrence Roberts, Ernest Green, Elizabeth Eckford, Thelma Mothershed, and that's all. And Thelma Mothershed. So, again, top 9 students, supposed to be this reward. But again, Arkansas is up in an uproar about this. And first day of school, September 4th, 1957. Sorry. So, September 4th, 1957. Now, these 9 students will arrive at Central High School to be greeted by a throng of people, of angry, hostile, horrific people, dogged by just this mob of people with bats and sticks and signs, hollering and screaming, and just this rage at their presence at this school. Shouting the phrase 2, 4, 6, 8, we ain't gonna integrate. And not only that, the day before school is gonna open, so September 3rd, Governor Fabbis, who was the governor of Arkansas, was so against this that he personally called out the Arkansas National Guard and had them stationed all around the school, guys, to deny these students access. To deny these students access into the school. They had the soldiers stationed at the doors so these students couldn't get in. It was that bad. It's crazy. So 8 of them, bless their hearts, 8 of them go to the front door. And again, there's film crews there. There's cameras there. There's reporters there capturing this day. And all they're capturing are these 8 children, who, by the way, 8 of them were 16 years old. One of them was a senior, 17 years old. So 16, 17-year-old kids against hundreds of angry, just livid citizens. The military, I mean, my dear God, 8 of them went to the correct door, fought it together. One of them, Elizabeth Eckford. There's a very famous picture. Google Elizabeth Eckford, Central High School, and the image will pop up. She had to face this thing all by herself. She went to the wrong side of the building and had to face a crowd of hundreds and the military and people all screaming at her and spitting on her and booing her and chanting her. She had to deal with it all by herself. And there's a very famous picture of it. But long story short, they weren't able to get to school. They could not get into school, so they returned. They give up. They're turned away because soldiers aren't going to let them in, regardless. So they return home. And there were so many reporters there. Were TV cameras. We are in the late 50s, 60s. We were in the late 50s. TV is out, right? Cameras are there. Everybody's seeing the footage of this, and becomes a national story. Eisenhower, as you read about, phenomenal president, phenomenal human being. Technically not always on board with civil rights, and not because he was for the Jim Crow laws. He was for technically supporting segregation. He didn't feel that our country was ready to go this direction yet. He didn't necessarily think it was right, but he also didn't think we were ready for this fight yet. So there's a lot of info of him out there sounding like he's against civil rights, and it's not that he was necessarily against the concept. He was against the time frame. He goes, it's just not the right time. This is going to be a bloodbath, which it was. But when he hears about what happened in Arkansas, it's one thing to be against the idea of it, but again, if action is needed, he's going to take action. And so he goes before, he sees what happened, he hears what happened that day, he goes before the press. He will have this this news conference that'll be, cast all over television, disgracing the actions of Governor Fabbis, disgracing the people of Arkansas, and basically saying, this is not who we are, this is not what we will do, this will not be tolerated. He gets a hold of Governor Fabbis, he tells him, you will remove all of the soldiers, you will fix this, these children will go to school, you don't want to mess with me. To mentality, right? Test me. So, the National Guard are recalled. 2 weeks later, so mid-September, these 9 students once again return to Central High School, and this time there are no soldiers there. This time they can walk straight up into. There's still the throng of people. There's still the mob of people who don't want them there, with the signs who are booing and chanting and hissing and spitting. But there's nobody physically stopping them. So these 9 children return to school, able to get inside, and technically were able to go to school. To a point. But nobody in that school, no other student wants them there. Teachers don't want them there. Nobody wants them there. And the air of hostility in that school is just rampant. It's just past craze. Absolutely past craziness. And the longer they're in that school, it is like turning a thermostat up all the way to explosion rate. It's like a volcano that was laying dormant that is starting to bubble. That, it's getting hotter and hotter and hotter to the point of exploding, right, to erupting. And that's what the air inside the school is. The longer these kids are in there, everyone inside is just getting hotter and hotter and hotter and are just so crazed at these students' presence. It was getting to the point where just a pin, you could have heard a pin drop, and all it would have taken was somebody snapping for these kids just to break and, and attack. I mean, it was attack these kids and rip these kids to shreds. It was that hostily bad. And these kids will end up, by the way, being pulled. That first day of school didn't even finish their first day. Were pulled out of school and sent home literally for their own safety, because if they stayed, it was believed that they were going to get attacked and they weren't going to survive. I mean, they would be beaten, pulled, ripped apart. They may not survive the day. Once again, they return home. Once again, this reaches the ears of Eisenhower. Once again, he will address the public. And once again, he will take matters into his own hands. He will again go before the nation, address the nation, express his disgust at what was happening in Arkansas, and basically state, this is not who we are, this is not what we will do. And he says, if no one else will take care of this, I will. He calls out, he's going to call out the big dogs. He's going to call out the Screaming Eagles, the 101st Airborne Division of the military, to fly, to send them to Arkansas to protect these kids. He's also going to call back out the National Guard. And the National Guard is going to re-arrive with the goal of protecting these children. And long story short, for a third time, the Little Rock Nine will return back to school. And each day they are going to be assigned their own personal bodyguard just to get them through the day. There will be guards stationed at every door. There will be guards stationed and soldiers stationed in the cafeteria. There's going to be guards stationed inside and outside. Every student has their own personal military bodyguard to walk them to class, to stand beside their desk every day, just so they can go to school. I mean, it's at that point. But there's still places that these soldiers can't go with these children, especially the girls, bathrooms and locker rooms. That's the one place they are not protected. And they knew it. Every time they walk into a bathroom, every time they walk into a locker room, they know what's waiting for them on the other side. And it's just bad. I mean, the beatings, just everything that happens to every single day, these children face hell. Every single day, verbally abused, physically beaten, assaulted, just as bad as they can get. Every day they leave school just being raked over the coals, and the next day they come back. They're not going to be beaten. They're not going to be chased off. They're not going to lose this battle, because this has become a war for survival, and they're not going to give in. Every single day they go through hell. Every single next day they come back. It's so impressive. I don't know if I could do it. I really don't. I don't think I could do it. I give up. They are not going to be beaten. 8 of the 9 will graduate. Ernest Green, by the way, was Central High's first graduate. He will graduate in 1958. 7 of the others will finish out their junior years. There is one. One will not finish out the year, and not because she didn't want to, because she's expelled. And that is Minnie Jean Brown. Bless her heart. Minnie Jean will be expelled for something so stupid, it should make your jaws drop. She's apparently lunch in the school cafeteria that day was chili. She goes to the lunch line, she gets her bowl of chili and whatever else she has. She's walking to a table to eat. She's walking past a table of teenage boys who are whistling and catcalling at her and this and that. But then one of them calls her an insanely derogatory name. And for her, it was just her breaking point. For her, when she heard herself be called that, it was enough. So she turns around, walks back by the table, and whoops, somehow her bowl of chili coat falls off of her tray and lands on top of this jackass's head, right? Who called her just the most inappropriate name ever. So she jumps a bowl of chili on someone's head. Which, oh, hell to the freaking no. How dare she, right? How dare this black girl do this to this white boy? All hell will break out in the lunchroom. This huge food fight will be started. Brawl will begin. Soldiers have to race in. They pull her out for her own safety. And it just turns into a crazy event. And when all said and done, the boy who started this whole thing off gets slapped on the wrist and then don't do it again. And Minnie Jean will be, for dropping her bowl of chili on somebody's head, will be expelled. Because that punishment fit that crime, right? She will be expelled, have to finish out the year somewhere else. It's just ridiculous. It's so ridiculous it hurts my head sometimes. But it's the truth of the matter. And when she says, years later, why she did it, she says, I can't just always take everything they throw out. I just can't take everything they throw at me without eventually fighting back. Eventually, enough's got to be enough. And I say, hell yeah, girl. Good for you. But in 1957, 1958, she will be expelled. Bless her heart. The others will again finish out the school year. They will all finish. Ernest Green will graduate. And I'll tell you, it had to be pretty good. It had to feel pretty good. For when Ernest Green is walking across the stage in 1958 to receive his high school diploma, the first person to stand up in the audience and start to applaud for him was Dr. King. Dr. King had flown all the way to Central High School's graduation to support and be a part of Ernest Green's graduation. This to show, just as a sign, it's just cool. It's just one of those cool things. A sign of respect and this huge reward. Because think about who your biggest idol is in terms of not necessarily celebrity, which I'm sure that'd be cool too, but activist or something of that measure. And for them to, to show you a sign of respect and how much that they admire you and they support what you've done, they take their time to come all the way to your graduation. It would be pretty cool. I'm not gonna lie, it'd be pretty cool. But it was a hell of a year. And actually, Central High School actually shut down for the next... they'll completely shut down for a year. It was so detrimental, everybody needed a break. So, every student will be dispersed to another school the next year, while Central High School has to recover from the year of 57 to 58. But I'll tell you, there is a clip you need to watch under modules. It says Little Rock 9. You'll be tested over it. There will be quiz questions that come over it and / off of it. They didn't change. They all went on to these insatiable careers. There are some that went on to work for the Department of Defense for our country. There are those who are clinical psychologists. Some of them are college professors. One was Gloria Ray was a prolific computer science writer, magazine writer, published magazines in 39 countries. They all continued to grow. They all continued to thrive and flourish. And it was just really freaking cool. Really freaking cool to see. So they didn't change. They stayed true to who they were. We changed. And there's a great clip. Make sure to watch that clip because it'll show, thankfully, how far we've come since then. But for now, that ends our lecture over civil rights in the 1950s. And I will be back shortly with our next as we launch into civil rights in the 1960s. See you soon.